Okay, so we talked about three components of a good joint: straight grain, uh, grain orientation, and how it affects wood movement, and orienting parts for maximum compatibility and moisture control, so dry, super dry joint. The next component is precise fit. So for my chairs, I drill a 5/8 mortise, and it's I use a really good drill bit, and I get a really precise 5/8 diameter mortise. And what I want to do is get so 5/8 is 625 thousandths. What I want to achieve is to turn that tenon to be as close to that size as possible. This is an example of a tenon that I've turned at, again, this is super dry, tenon that I've turned at super dry state. And my method, there are lots of ways to size a tenon. My method is to use this wrench is sized at 650 thousandths. And essentially I do a roughing cut with a beading and parting tool and get the flat of the tenon down to a fairly consistent 650 thousandths in diameter. Then I have a second wrench that is sized to 625 thousandths, which I know is the diameter of my mortise. And I run that part along the surface, and I use a 1-inch roughing gouge, and I make very light cuts across the surface of the tenon, removing just a little bit of material and evening out any inconsistencies I have in the diameter. And when it won't do this here, well, it does. When that wrench fits over the tenon and slides with a certain amount of resistance or not, I know I'm right there in that range of 625 thousandths. And I don't usually measure them because I'm very confident that I've got there. We'll measure this one, 626. I can live with that. 625. At this point, when you're measuring by thousandths, you can press down a little harder and get the number you want.
It's kind of how the joint works too, right?
Yeah. So very close, within a few thousandths. The point is within a few thousandths of the target. And I can do that consistently, rung after rung, using this method. Many people use a single wrench. I have found that I have trouble getting a consistent diameter that way. This is such an important part of the joint, that precise fit. It's so important that I wanted to come up with a way that students could do this consistently. And I think this is a way, basically a roughing cut and a finish cut. And that gives you the opportunity, and the finish cut is taking very small cuts each time. So the finish cut allows you to fine tune that to a surface like this.
So in a perfect world, the tenon and the mortise are exactly the same diameter.
Perfect world, yes.
Okay.
But I would say within 5 thousandths, but I wouldn't want to go 5 thousandths over.
On the tenon or the mortise?
On the tenon.
So the range is exactly the same, minus 5 thou in diameter.
Yeah, and if you go over, don't go over by much.
Because you might
1 or 2
leg
thousandths,
or...
yeah.
Okay.
So I try not to go over, but I'm okay if I go down to 620. It will still, when you put that in, it will, if you put it in just by hand, it will feel like a very tight joint.
Mm-hmm.
If you we use very heavy duty clamps to bring the parts together. I can tell the difference just in the way the parts go together when there's glue lubricating the process, and we have these very heavy duty clamps bringing the legs together over the tenons. I can tell how tight the joint is at that point. If it makes nice popping sounds that scare the students, that's good. And you know, over time the drill bit wears out, And as the drill bit wears, the mortises get a little bigger, and I can tell that too. And when that happens, I start adjusting my tenons to match. I'll make them a little bigger. And I can do that based on how much friction I get with the finishing, with finish caliper. These are now calipers, not wrenches, finish caliper. The important thing is to match the tenon to the mortise. So whatever mortise you're drilling, you want to match the tenon to. Don't assume it's 625 thousandths. It may or may not be based on the quality of your drill bit.
So drill a sample mortise and measure it.
And well, it's hard to measure a mortise. It's really hard because it's hard to get at the apex of the circle. I do it based on how does it go together in an actual assembly.
And then you can
So
measure the tenon.
I would do a test mortise and a test tenon, and I would put them between a clamp and glue everything, the whole thing, and glue them together. And based on how they go together, if they go together really easily, too loose. If they make nice popping sounds and you feel like the thing's going to break apart, that's where you want to be.
You want to measure that tenon.
If they actually break apart, then you're too heavy.
Okay. And so you measure your tenons first and then do a sample assembly and
That's what I would
keep
do.
track of, you know.
Even if they go together easily, they're still going to be a nice tight joint. Remember, that's going to expand.
Right, and you
inside
are
the joint.
using, it's easy with clamps. It's
Yeah.
not like you're pushing it in by hand. If it's that easy,
I could not push this in by hand, even with glue on it. I could not get it in without a clamp.
even if it was 5 thousandths under.
Even with 5,000 under, you would not be able to do it.